Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to RCI TV for round 2 of the European Masters Championship. We're back for 80 minutes of racing here tonight at Zolder after we kicked off 80 minutes of racing at Imola just a week ago. My name is Ryan Gill, your lead commentator for this evening, and joining me behind the cameras is Jake Boswell, and in the commentary box, it's the ever-familiar voice of Jesse Lee. How are you doing tonight, Jesse?
Hello, everybody out there at RCI TV, and hello to you, Ryan and Jake, as well. I'm doing well. I'm doing decently, and this is round 2 of this championship, the European Championship, indeed, at the continuing European tracks. And, well, for those of you that thought that you were rid of me, well, unfortunately, going to have to suffer with me for another week. The Jesse Lee takeover of RCI in full effect. But Ryan, let's talk about race number 1, week 1, that we dealt with a week ago. Absolute chaos. But out of everybody, the 888 of James Parker was the shining star.
He definitely was the shining star, took the opening race of the season in stride and in very, very dominant fashion to take a win. Couldn't quite repeat that performance in the second race of the season. Of course, that went to Cody Pride. And, James Parker, despite his efforts, did not get on the podium for the second race, but does lead the championship on points. We'll get into the points later on in the show for all of you at home. But yes, James Parker, in the first race of the season, very much did steal the show. But he wasn't the only one out there that had a very, very good performance over the 2 races last week. This driver here, Mia Rose, she had a very, very good performance. Started lower down. It was about 12th on the grid. She started for both of the 40-minute races last week. And, ended up in the top 5 for one race and ended up just outside the top 5 for another. Very good performances from her. Killian Ryan Meenan and Mike Noble gave themselves some good account with some very, very good performances as well. And so did Martin Schumacher, who seems to be struggling here in practice this week. Of course, we're at a brand new circuit. We've come all the way over to Belgium. And as you can clearly see, the weather has been kind to us this time around. There is a very, very low chance of rain, and it's not raining.
Of course, the update to the format, rounds 1 and 5 ran in 2 40-minute sessions. The rest of the rounds is a 80-minute race, and that's what we have on tap for you tonight. So no 2 races, just the one chance to get it right. And everybody will be looking here in qualifying to get the better starting spot. I always say every time we come to Zolder that it's one of those tracks that you genuinely need to qualify well at, because it's a very tight, compact circuit. There is a lot of passing areas, but unfortunately, for whatever reason, a lot of those passing attempts seem to go awry. But nevertheless, even if they do, live stewarding in full effect for the Monday Championship as well. And we will see how that all shakes out. Well, based on practice here, Ryan Gill, who is your money on in qualifying?
Oh, well, I mean, looking at the practice, it's been a very, very good practice session for some of our Ferrari and BMW drivers as well. The regular faces up towards the top of the tables here at the end of practice. And you know what? If I'm going to put anyone on money to come out, with a fast lap and really set down a benchmark for everyone else to follow, it's got to be the 1-2-3 car of Mike Noble. I don't really think you can go wrong with his choice. Maybe, he does make a couple of mistakes in the race. We have seen that as of late, but his qualifying performances are particularly good. And I would not be surprised to see his car up in front at the end of the qualifying session, which has now started, by the way. 10 minutes of qualifying underway here at Zolder. You'll have noticed the change of time of day, qualifying taking place at 1 in the afternoon, and that is true for every qualifying session of this season. All the qualifying sessions will take place at 1 in the afternoon, but all of the races will take place at different times of day, depending on which round we are at. So consistent qualifying conditions and time of day for all of the drivers out here, but it's going to be a little bit of a play with them, how they have to prepare for qualifying conditions, which will be very, very different to the race conditions that we'll have in not too long, where it's going to be 6 in the morning around Zolder for an 80-minute race.
Well, that practice session might be of a bit more importance than usual, I would say, because that is sort of the baseline. Qualifying pressures are going to be different. Like you said, the track temp very hot. It probably will be about 8 degrees, perhaps lower in the race. We'll have to see if that is the case. 18 teams here. We've had quite a few sign-outs and some extra sign-outs on top of that due to issues. Cody Pride, for instance, I just learned, Ryan, is not here due to a mechanical issue.
Yeah, Cody Pride. I mean, we saw in the World Tour race that we had on the weekend that quite a few teams had faced technical issues with both ACC and their own hardware, sim racing equipment and computers, and it seems to be something that has kind of carried over into the week, it would seem, as well. There's a lot of people coming off the endurance race of the World Tour. There was also the big 24 hours of Suzuka for the British University of Sim Racing that a lot of people, I think, would have been competing in as well. So I think quite a few factors playing into absences here tonight. But you and I know, Jesse, all it takes is 2 drivers to make a race here tonight. We've got 18 so far. We might have another couple jump in late during the qualifying session. And, we have some of the biggest talents in ACC on the grid here tonight. So I'm not really concerned about the low numbers, and I think it'll still be a very good showing. We've been on board here with Clyde Barney at this point in time. The number 85 Ferraris has been going around on their first lap in qualifying to set down a banker lap. This will be the benchmark lap for everyone to follow, and very creative livery on the number 85 Ferrari crosses the line, and it is actually going to be an invalid lap from the Dutchman. So no lap time set down there, and it will be Andy Boardman for the second time this season that does set down the first lap of the qualifying session. It's a 1:29.286. But that is immediately beaten by Paulo Lima in the Mercedes into the 28th right off the bat.
Yeah, and it's not going to stay there either. I reckon they have quite a bit more in the tank. James Parker comes across the line in the 888, a 29.196. A nice banker lap by everybody in tow as Killian Ryan Meenan comes across the line. And now Mike Noble at a 28.314. Now that's more like it. That's pretty much the range that I expected that we would start off in. The FFS Racing BMW absolutely getting it done here so far, as that becomes the mark to beat. And what about this man? Joined us over the weekend in the 10 hour. Talked to him and his teammate for FFS Racing, and always a hoot. Wasn't in the car for the 10 hour, but was, let's just say he was enjoying himself, and why not? The team was doing incredibly well in that race. But on the track today, and what does Torvinen have? Good enough for 5th place, a 29.067 in the Porsche. 5 minutes to go, and a lot of time still left on the table.
Andy Boardman comes around for his second lap of the qualifying session, and that'll be good enough to throw him up into 3rd place. Andy Boardman, one of the very much improved drivers, I would say, over the last few months. Paulo Lima will throw his Mercedes up into 2nd, but only briefly though, as James Parker, the championship leader, will throw his BMW onto the front of the grid. But not for long though, as Killian Ryan Meenan in the Ferrari, 128.0. We're so close to the 127 mark. And it is a Ferrari on provisional pole right now. And I have to say, Jesse, coming into this championship, I know we talked about it last week, where there were doubts about the Ferrari being the dominant car for this series. We saw such a good showing from the BMWs out at Imola in the rain last week. I think it's really good that in qualifying already here today, we'll see 3 BMWs up to the top 5 as Ryan Meenan rides the curbs a bit too aggressively through the first chicane and ends up in the wall, and that is his qualifying run done. Back to the pit lane, and will have to reset from 0.
You know what's weird about that? Ryan Meenan rode those cars directly back to his garage stall. That was an all-or-nothing play, and that shows you how important qualifying is. If Ryan Meenan would have been able to pull that off, that would have been monumental, heroic status stuff there. As Mike Noble now coming across the back half of the circuit, just one more chicane to go. And looking like this could be a lap that puts him back on pole. Mike Noble, who's winning this championship after 2 rounds, doesn't want to be left behind and want to put their name in the fight. Well, they could certainly do that today with an 80-minute race. Well, what is this qualifying number given? It's going to be straight to number 1, 27.750. The current mark to be 3 minutes left. And I'm just...
Well, Mike Noble goes to the top of the timing sheet, 127.750. Incredibly fast lap time. Well, Paulo Lima sits in 5th place at this point in time. Portuguese driver in the Mercedes, the lone Mercedes at this point in time, although Ipek has jumped up into 3rd place as well. So 2 Mercedes actually now filling out into the top 5. Mia Rose finding herself in P6 at this point in time, but 7/10 of a second off of the provisional pole time of Mike Noble right now. But it seems, Jesse, that with Ryan Meenan being the closest to Mike Noble, but still 0.3 of a second off the pace, I think it's going to be quite a bit of a challenge for a few of these guys to match that provisional pole time.
Yes, indeed. And folks at home, we do apologize for everybody turning into a robot there. Our audio provider had a little brief incident, and we are back now, but we do apologize for the inconvenience. Ryan Meenan, I was saying, whenever you couldn't understand me anyway, I was saying that I found that interesting. Killian immediately darted out of the pit lane and will have gotten one timed lap out of this, and it could mean all of the difference. 0.3 of a second. Now, Mia Rose comes through 7th, now all the way up to 4th. A 22.5.
Well, as the lap times continue to come in, Mia Rose up into 4th place provisionally at this point in time on the 2nd row of the grid, just ahead of James Parker, the championship leader, on the 3rd row of the grid at this point in time. He's back in the pit lane, though, as the timer ticks over to 0. The qualifying session has come to an end, and all of the drivers that are currently out on a flying lap will have to wrap them up now. Mike Noble back in the pit lane, and he's going to settle for whatever he has at this point in time, sitting on provisional pole. Does he think he's safe? Is he confident that no one else can beat him? Well, Ryan Meenan is up by 1/4 of a second on this lap at the moment, and if anyone out there has the chance to beat Mike Noble for that provisional pole, it's going to be either Ryan Meenan or Mia Rose, sitting 2nd or 4th at this point in time in qualifying. Killian dropping a bit of time through the middle sector, coming through the hairpin now and up towards the final sequence of corners. Just losing a slight bit of time here. Will he be able to gain a significant amount of time through the last couple of corners? We'll have to see. Mia Rose can't improve on her time. Fourth is the best she will do. Killian loses time through the final couple of corners. He'll gain a 10th on his qualifying lap, but it won't be enough to challenge Mike Noble in the 1, 2, 3, and a BMW takes pole position here for 80 minutes of racing tonight.
That's exactly what what Mike Noble needed to do. I'm thinking about Mike Jones here tonight, as I often am. Mike Noble, that's exactly what he needed. I talked about him being fourth in the championship, and he needs to draw the line in the sand that he is going to be a force to be reckoned with in the championship, and that's exactly how to get that done. Go out there and grab pole, give yourself the best possibility and the best chance to succeed.
And we did promise you that we would bring you the championship standings before the start of the race this evening, and here they are. So it is James Parker that leads the way after 2 races last week, and he has 113 points to his name. Afuk Barber sits in second place in the championship, not present here tonight. The 866 on 102 points, and that's going to be unfortunate for them. Martin Schumacher, though, sits third in the championship. He is present here tonight, but has qualified all the way down in 12th place, so that's not going to be great for Martin Schumacher. Mike Noble, the pole sitter, fourth in the championship, and Andy Boardman in the top 5. Mia Rose, Jarkko Torvinen, Cody Pride, Killian Ryan Meenan, and Harry Conway round out the top 10 on points. Progressing on to the second page, Jack Young on 48 points in 11th place, just outside the top 10. Then we've got Mr. M. Jones in 12th, followed by Romano Berenic, Robin Schaefer, and Olaf Leffer rounding out the top 15. Manas Girannis, Nico Kumpu, Atabak Ertan, Mihad Numik, and Paulo Lima. He's had a very, very good qualifying session here today, rounding out the top 20. And then the rest of the standings, well, we've got Atakan Akar in 21st, followed by Crow, Barney, Ipek Chinotti, Ozcan, and Cormac Ryan Meenan. And then it was Ethan Jenkins, Philip Borovec, and Bart Matcher that were not present for round 1. But I believe a couple of those are present here tonight for the second round of the championship. And as we switch back to the scenes and the sounds of the Zolder circuit, it is 6 in the morning, and it will be a nice sunrise to welcome us later on in the race. But the grid is set, and it is going to be Mike Noble and Killian Ryan Meenan on the front row of the grid. The FFS Racing and Side Max Motorworks lining up together on the front row. It's BMW and Ferrari. It's the two cars that have really told the story of the season so far, even though it's been a fairly short story. But it's going to be interesting nonetheless. Ipek and Rhodes in third and fourth. Parker and Torvinen sitting on the third row of the grid. Gerardus and Kumpu on the fourth row. And then Lima and Berenic round out the top 10. Boardman, Schumacher, Matcher, Schaefer, Jones, Barney, Leffer, and Jenkins round out a fairly small grid for this evening's race. But 80 minutes of racing is soon to get underway as Mike Noble pulls away to start us off on the formation lap here tonight, Jesse.
Yes, and you just get a sense already, this is the third race in the championship, round 2 as well, that this is going to come down to Mike Noble and James Parker. It has all the classic hallmarks. We're no stranger to seeing it come down to those two as well. What I am curious about is to see if anybody can prove me wrong. Can Paulo Lima get in there? What can Martin Schumacher do today coming from P12? And just what exactly will be the story of the day? This is my favorite part of any race because we don't know what exactly is going to happen. Mike Noble could drive it down to the first chicane, spin, and the whole thing's blown wide open. Right now, all the pressure on Mike Noble to get this right. He didn't have a terrible race 1 and race 2, but of course looking for a race that's oh so very special, a race win here. He's going to have to survive 80 minutes to do it, but if Mike Noble's taught me anything, is that, well, he can do pretty much anything. What about Ryan Meenan? How strong of a challenge can we expect from that Ferrari? They seem to be about on pace, but lost it in qualifying. What is the long run capabilities of the 231 machine? And what about IPEC and Rose starting from the second row? It is about time here in RCI that Mia Rose gets a good championship and some good finishes that she deserves. She runs very well all of the time, but just frequently doesn't have the finishes to back up how well she races. And what can our championship leader James Parker do from 5th place, I wonder? It's going to be an uphill battle, and even though starting in 5th place, this is one of those tracks, for whatever reason, very hard to pass on, very hard. Actually, I took that back. It's easy to try and make a pass here. It's hard to make it stick. What on earth can we expect here? And from the rest of the field, I gotta like say, it's almost like survival to start a race like this. It's a very tight and compact track. Ryan, I'm raring to get going. One chicane away. This is going to be a fantastic start.
It should be a fantastic start. 18 minutes of racing here at Zolder tonight. No mandatory pit stops. You may have noticed that on the side of the screen. Strategy will be completely down to the drivers and whatever they can pull out of their cars here tonight. Will there be tyres? Will there be fuel stops for any of these cars out here tonight? How much fuel will they take? So many stories to be decided, as you said, Jesse, but the lights are out. 80 minutes of racing is now underway, and Mike Noble leads us down into turn 1, but Ryan Meenan gets a good start, and we've got a car off into the gravel track. And I think that was Mia Rose. It was, and Noble! Killian have come together at turn 2! And Noble is off into the gravel.
Oh, it's melee. It's Bedlam into turn 2. Ryan Meenan has turned Mike Noble. Mia Rose has gone off into turn 1. James Parker is going to be leading this race from P5. Absolutely incredible scenes.
Well, they said you can't predict the start to a race. That could not have been any more unpredictable. Collision between the two drivers on the front row. And then, of course, Mia Rose going off at turn 1 as well. The whole race has been flipped on its head, but luckily for those drivers here tonight, it's an 80-minute race. There's plenty of time to get back into this. But for some of those drivers out here today, particularly James Parker, Jarkko Torvinen, Romano Berenik, this is a fantastic opportunity to get a boatload of points over your opponents.
I cannot believe what I'm seeing. Mike Noble, who qualified on pole, who went through turn 1 in P1, went through turn 2 in P18. Last on the field, a confirmation that the 909 BMW was the car to go off in the first turn. That was Mia Rose. They are now 18th and completely last. It's going to be contact. It's going to be contact. Jarkko Torvinen and James Parker nearly turning them. And look at Kumpu coming up the outside. Down the inside. Is that Berenik or Torvinen? That's Torvinen and Berenik in a line on the inside. Side by side for the lead between Kumpu and Parker. And just holding it is James Parker into turn 2.
James Parker getting a big scare out of the final corner. Jarkko Torvinen just running into the back of him. It's not worked out in Torvinen's favour. He's down into 4th place. Kumpu and Berenik got the jump. They're up into the podium places now. And James Parker, well, what was looking like an incredible start to his race, being able to jump up into the lead after the first couple of corners, almost ending in disaster as well. But now he's got a completely new set of problems as Nico Kumpu looks to have pace on the BMW early on in this race. He wants to have a go at James Parker's BMW. And let's not forget Romano Berenik. He was the dominant man throughout the pre-qualifying stages for this championship. Didn't have a great couple of races out at Imola, but he's at the front of the grid here tonight.
I cannot imagine what championship leader James Parker is thinking right now. obviously at the start of the race would have been thinking, okay, how do I navigate traffic? The seas parted, and all of a sudden you're the leader, but now you know Kumpu's intentions here, and it is to take the lead away from you very close. The rear wing of James Parker's BMW looking back at Kumpu, and now the in-car cam of Kumpu looking at the top or the back of James Parker's BMW. A cheeky little peek to the inside of one. Doesn't look like that's going to be an option as it's single file line astern, as everybody now starting to get a little bit of space except these two. And don't count out Baranek, who was a big winner there as well with the contact with Torvinen earlier. And now Baranek up to third and right on the bumper of Kumpu. This is close quarters racing.
It definitely is, and this is where James Parker's BMW really does start to earn its money. The power it has coming out of the corners, the power it has on the straights. The straights are not very long here at Zolder, but that BMW still earns its weight in gold with the power it has out of the corners. And Kumpu's made a mistake through the first chicane, and this is Romano Berenek's chance. The Porsche, is it going to have the inside line for the second chicane? Thinks better of it. There's still over 76 minutes of racing to go. Plenty of time to get that move done. And Kumpu's made a mistake again. And is this going to be Berenek's chance? No, doesn't look like it. And this is sort of a blessing in disguise now for James Parker as Nico Kumpu starts to make a couple of crucial mistakes. This is where the consistency will really start to pay off for Parker in the BMW, but we have a long way to go, Jesse.
I was just going to say, Ryan, that James Parker will have thought he has won the lottery on several accounts now. Kumpu making a few mistakes now has given him a little bit of breathing room that he would gladly pay a fortune for at this stage. And all of a sudden now you can calm down a little bit, but not too much. Stay focused and get on the wheel. Mike Noble up to P15. Remember, they were P18 in turn 2, lap 1. And now all the way up into 15th place, but still a long old way to go, and still a lot of strategy being played out. And what about Killian Ryan Meenan now, who's still up in 6th place, who was, it looked to me like Killian was trying to slow down. It obviously didn't mean to turn Mike Noble, but did anyway. I'm interested to see what the stewards will say about that. Of course, Monday Championship, the European GT Championship, is, of course, live stewarded, so I'm very interested to see what they will say. Oh boy, time to catch your breath here a minute, I think.
Yeah, plenty for the stewards to say, I think, on the start of this race, and an unfortunate start for Mia Rose as well. We saw her go off into the gravel trap at turn 1. We don't entirely know what happened with the 909. Hopefully we can find out a bit later on in the race. Maybe there was an incident that we didn't quite see at the start. But she's found herself way down the order at this point in time, and she's already back in the pit lane. I wonder if that's maybe an early retirement, and it does look like it as well as she disappears off the timing screen. So that seems like it's Mia Rose's evening done for this evening at least, and that is a big shame to see. But James Parker still leads the way, and Nico Kumpu seems to have recomposed themselves. And he's having another look at this point in time as Audi and Ferrari going side by side through turn 1. That's Boardman and Gerardis. And looks like Gerardis has managed to maintain that 9th place. Boardman now, though, under attack from Schaefer. And Bart Macher in the background, he's looking interested as well.
Yeah, it's a little tasty back here for about 10th place. Everybody getting in the mix there. And for James Parker, his one lap of rest has been broken by Kumpu, who's continuing to try and catch him. But Baranek is not going to set idly by. And even though Baranek has to know that Kumpu is catching Parker, I think Baranek might be quicker than the lot of them.
Well, as we're looking at the fastest laps of the race here on our timing board, Jesse, Jarkko Torvinen, I think, has the fastest lap of the race so far, 129.7. And James Parker, who's leading at this point in time, hasn't actually dropped into the 29s at all. And as I say that, actually, Paulo Lima's got a 129.6 on the board. And looking behind, in fact, I don't think, the only driver outside of the 29s is Andy Boardman, James Parker, and Mr. Jones. So there's only 3 drivers outside of the 129s on a regular basis, lap by lap here at the moment, and one of them is the race leader, and of course that just creates a cork in the bottle situation that you're seeing right here, and Nico Kumpu, he's quite eager to get on with this.
Well, he doesn't have a choice because Beranek is going to continue to try and pass him. So he doesn't have a choice. He has to try and be aggressive here, make this pass. Looking down to the inside of the chicane, he's going to show him his nose, but to no avail. Line astern as they go, as several of the cars in the background, I think that was Paulo Lima, who jumped over the inside curb there. And like you said, Jarkko Torvinen, who is the fastest man on the track right now, is 4th in this line. And as terrible of a race as it started out for Mike Noble in the lot, it has been very spicy here up front, to say the least. What do you do if you're Jarkko Torvinen and you are 4th in line here? There's not a whole lot you can do.
And I tell you what, Nico Kumpu will want to get a move on and get past James Parker, because he knows if James Parker is one of the only drivers, one of the slowest drivers on the track right now, if he can get ahead of James Parker, he can start to build a gap. And that will be crucial later on in the race when strategy comes into effect. But James Parker doing everything he needs to do at this point in time. And dare I say it, Jesse, he's got one of the best cars on the grid for defending out of corners. He's got one of the best cars on acceleration. And once that car gets up into the high gears, it really is difficult to overtake, no matter what car goes up against it.
Right, you are. I couldn't have said it better myself. And Tom Bryant, our recently vaccinated friend here at RCI, confirming that Mia Rose in the 909 was contacted by the 224 of IPEC going into turn 1. That caused her to go wildly off the track. And contact there between Killian Ryan Meaden, and I'm not sure who that was behind him. Was that Lima, perhaps, that they had contact with? No, that was a Porsche. So I'm not sure exactly what happened there.
Well, Killian Ryan Meaden up into 4th place, and it is Jarkko Torvinen that suffered. He's just gone down to 6th place because of that. That means Paulo Lima's jumped up into the top 5, and Killian Ryan Meaden, he'll have to drive quite aggressively now to try and work his way back up the field. I imagine that there's going to be some form of penalty coming out for the incident on the first lap. Of course, the stewards will be much stricter on any incidents in the first lap of the race. And Killian Ryan Meaden, he's been around here plenty of times before. He knows that. And he knows exactly how the stewards think around here, so he is probably expecting some form of penalty within the next few minutes. And of course, we'll keep you up to date with any penalty decisions around the circuit and throughout the rest of the race. Meanwhile, Nico Kumpu
he missed the turn again. He missed the turn again, Ryan.
Just a slight mistake there from Nico Kumpu, and Romano Beranek sitting in behind here waiting. But I don't think Romano Beranek can afford. He can't afford to wait because Killian Ryan Meaden is here. And like I said last week, he's a hunter. Once he starts getting in behind people, once he starts seeing you get held up, make mistakes, that's when he likes to pounce. And he's not afraid to muscle his way through.
No, he's sure not. And I suspect something's coming for Killian. And I wonder how harsh it's going to be, since it was a lap 1 penalty. Or because it happened on lap 1, had it confirmed by Tom Bryant that what I saw and was confused about did actually happen. Contact between Killian Ryan Meaden and Jarkko Torvinen. You'll notice Jarkko Torvinen was 4th and is now 6th, so that contact lost him a spot or two, not only to Killian, but also Paulo Lima. So Torvinen back to 6th place now, out of line, and probably a bit frustrated with that, with the contact as well into the chicane. But that does not change the front runners here. They're all in a line together. James Parker, the leader of the race, perhaps the cork in the bottle here as they go into 2. And you can see the intent by Kumpu. If Parker misses one of these turns by just a little bit, it's going to be game on and side by side. But it's not easy to go side by side here, but it's even harder to complete a pass. It's just not a track that you want to be doing a lot of passing on. Every time going down into the first chicane, you see Kumpu pull out, and look at everybody now stacking up. It was 3 drivers, then it was 4 drivers, and now it's 6 drivers all in a line, one by one. Look at that.
And I tell you what, Jesse, we've already had, I think, a very, very interesting strategy call from one of the drivers towards the mid-pack of the field. Bart Matcher has pitted early on in the race, and he's come back out on the track now. He's in clear air. He was one of the drivers doing 29s, and of course he was stuck up in the pack, but towards the back of the grid. Now, if James Parker can't get into the 29s, Bart Matcher has clear air to keep doing 29s. He's going to gain a ton of time on all the drivers out here. And he's gambled on the fact that everyone is going to have to pit today. 80 minutes is difficult to do in some of these cars. The Ferrari Evo is very, very aggressive on its fuel. The Porsche is very fuel limited. The BMW is probably not the most fuel efficient car either. It's going to be interesting to see what the strategy is here today, but I think the 404 has gambled on the fact that everyone is going to have to pit, and he's going to get himself some clear air as early as possible, and I like the thinking.
I also like the thinking, but I have some thoughts of my own. I think James Parker is heavy on fuel. I think that's the reason they're not doing 29s, and I think that's the reason they're a bit slow here. Perhaps they have fuel strategy behind them. And looking down the inside, this could be a real chance coming down into the first chicane. It's going to be contact, and it's going to be Kumpu around, and that's going to promote Baranek and Gillian Ryan Meenan up to second and third. Contact again into the first chicane. Kumpu around, James Parker continues, but like I was saying, I think that's why James Parker's slow, is I think he has brimmed the tank on that BMW, perhaps trying to make it to the end on fuel strategy, perhaps on a lower map as well, trying to race to a number, and if that is the case, him staying in front here, even though it's only just, is doing him a world of good right now.
It depends on how much time he'll lose by defending, though. That is the real question with James Parker. If he loses more time than he would gain out of running a lighter fuel load, it might work against him here, and he is definitely having to work for his positions at this point in time. We've got the first penalty of the race being handed out. Rob Schaefer has received a 15-second penalty. Right from the off here, we'll give you an update on why that penalty has been given when we get it handed over to us.
Definitely wasn't the one that I thought we were going to get.
Definitely not the first one I thought we'd get either, as Romano Baranek is now the next driver to worry James Parker's rear end. And I have actually got the note now from Stephen DeVos. Lap 2, turn 16, involving 12 and 939. 15-second penalty for the 939, makes contact with the side of the number 12 at turn 16, taking them out completely. The position is not returned. So that's why it was a 15-second penalty. That seems fair enough by me.
Look at Killian! Killian is just all sorts of out of shape in these corners, trying to get position on Baranek. Of course, Killian knows if the car in front of him makes a little bit of mistake, he knows where to put his Ferrari to get by the 66, so that's what he's doing, but he's fighting the car to do it, going offline and taking weird angles through these, through the forest here in Belgium. So that's what he's trying to do. It looks a bit scary, but it is being taken care of. And that penalty coming out first, by the way, the 939 one and the 12, that coming through first tells me one thing, is that they're deliberating on some of the earlier contacts, I think, Ryan.
Yeah, definitely. I think the lap 1 incidents are probably being looked into a bit more closely. It's always, lap 1 incidents, they can always be a bit more complex. They often require a few more angles to be looked at. And, sometimes they just need to be talked over a bit more to make sure that the right decision gets made. And unfortunately, that just means a bit more time is required for those kind of incidents, but the stewards will get around to it. They do a fantastic job around here, and they work as hard as possible to get these penalties done as quick as they can. Here comes Gillian Ryan Meenan up the inside into second place, and I told you that this man had to get a move on because there might be a penalty incoming for him. Well, he's doing exactly that. And I have to say, of all the drivers James Parker has had behind him here tonight, this is the one driver he probably wouldn't want to have behind him here tonight.
Yeah, he's probably pretty mad at Baranek now if I am James Parker, because you will have seen that that is now very much a red and black Ferrari and not a gray and white Porsche. You will be a bit annoyed by that because, like you said, that is the absolute last driver. That's the last driver, period, that I want in behind me if I am James Parker. A real threat here and no stranger to the late moves to the inside. And of course, like you said, also Killian has to get a move on here. He'll be wondering what's going to happen with the steward's decision, as well as a big defensive move by James Parker, and that's going to prompt Killian to go around the outside, and nearly is able to hold it, but can. And here comes Baranek back on the outside, nearly into the back of James Parker again, as they all come single file here, completely sideways, almost losing the car is Killian, and here he goes down the inside, which is going to become the outside, and all of a sudden, single file again, close quarters racing, well held by all accounts.
But here comes the Ferrari again. It's not quite over, and he's going to be forced to the outside line. Meanwhile, Jarkko Torvenen's managed to get past Paulo Lima, by the way, up into 4th place. And we've been told by the stewards that a penalty for the 2-3-1 is imminent. So we will see a resolution of the incident between Mike Noble and Killian Ryan-Meenan on the second corner of the first lap very, very soon. Good to know that the stewards are getting that one tied up right now, so there will be some form of penalty coming Killian's way. And if anything, that's just more of an incentive to get this move done as quick as possible. And James Parker, I mean, the defensive effort being done by the 888 right now is nothing short of incredible.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's nothing that says you can't defend in motor racing. There's nothing in the RCI rulebook that says that you can't defend. And James Parker is defending for his life, and who knows, this could be all a part of his strategy. Certainly he didn't expect to be leading at this stage, but he is, and now he is controlling the field. And, well, a track like this, hard to pass, using it to your advantage is the 888, and I just have to assume, because I've never seen James Parker slow in anything, so I'm genuinely assuming that he has brimmed that tank and is on a different fuel map, perhaps lean, trying to get to the finish without pit stopping here. And I'm telling you, Ryan, just every lap that he keeps these guys behind him is just a bonus to him.
And look at the train that this has got. We've got so many drivers, so many drivers within such a short part of the track. And it is so compact. And by the way, I've been keeping an eye on Bart Matcher's lap times, Jesse Lee. 129's consistent for the 404. James Parker's been doing 31s defending from this. Bart Matcher is almost 2 seconds a lap quicker on occasion than James Parker, and if he keeps eating into his lap time like that, it's not going to matter that the 404's done a pit stop.
Exactly. Well, this is the brilliant stuff, is that if you have done an early pit stop here and you have the speed, all this is doing is helping you, because if they're running a second slower than you, that's free lap times there. A second every single lap. Further back in the field, we've been so focused on the front of the field. Andy Boardman has a fight on his hands here.
Oh, Jarkko Torvenen into turn 1. I think he's just taken Romano Beranek. I saw it out of the corner of my eye, and he has.
Oh dear. Well, that is indeed what's happened. The 115 and the 66 has had it coming together. Let's see it, Ryan.
Oh, lovely move. Lovely move from Jarkko Torvenen.
Oh, he's just done him.
And Paulo Lima was in a bit of a look into there as well. And we've got penalties coming out as well. Drive-through penalty. Killian Ryan-Meenan has taken the lead, by the way, but he's received a drive-through penalty, and that will be for the collision that he had with Mike Noble on the opening lap. So drive-through penalty. This is Killian Ryan-Meenan taking the lead of the race, but it's not going to matter. And meanwhile, whilst all this is going on in the live pictures, James Parker is dropping through the field. Both Porsches have got past him in the second chicane. Jarkko Torvenen's up into second. Beranek is third. Parker down to fourth. The cork in the bottle has finally broken. But Killian has a drive-through to serve, so Jarkko Torvenen effectively leads the race.
Who would have thought that move into turn one, Torvinen, that excellent pass that he put on the 66 of Baranek, that would be the pass for the lead. Of course, it's not on the road as they run, but of course, with Killian having to do that drive-through penalty, that will do them absolutely no good. Well, while we have a moment, let us talk about the penalties that we have received. Drive-through for 224 for a collision with the 908. That was Mia Rose's car into turn one. The stewards note that was severe lag that caused that, but still a drive-through. Drive-through for the 231 for taking out the 123. That we've discussed that, and yeah, I think everything else we've covered. As actually Stephen DeVust, the head steward here. There's what I'm looking for. Drive-through for car 696. Late-braking, dangerous driving, causing multiple avoidable collisions with the 939, the 404, and the 100. So a drive-through for the 696.
And Andy Boardman has already served that drive-through penalty, by the way. He went in immediately to get that out of the way, but Killian Ryan-Minen and IPEC have not served their penalties as of this moment in time, but they will have to serve them soon. But my word, what has happened in the space of a couple of laps? Martin Schumacher, by the way, who didn't have a great qualifying, is sitting in 7th place at this point in time. 2 drivers ahead of him have a drive-through penalty. He's effectively racing 5th now.
That's amazing. That's amazing for a driver that is competing for this championship, mind you, is Martin Schumacher. And for him to start in what is effective, IPEC does come in, by the way, in the 2-2. For AMG. So up to 6th is Schumacher. Started 12th. He's effectively gained 6 spots, but like you said, it's actually 7 with the drive-through penalty for the leader of the race. And again, Torvinen, who is up there as well. He was enjoying himself this weekend, cheering on his team. Well, his team is likely cheering him on now, as he is currently leading. But by the way, I've just noticed that Baranek is still right there.
He is still right there, and he's going to be there, I think, till the end of the race, stalking down with Jarkko Torvinen. These two are effectively your race leaders, because Killian Ryan-Minen has to serve his drive-through penalty this lap, or ACC will automatically disqualify him. So he doesn't really have much of a choice in the matter, needs to serve the penalty on this occasion. And I imagine that we will see Killian Ryan-Minen do so. Meanwhile, Jarkko Torvinen trying to defend. We've got a Finnish driver versus a Croatian driver. And these are not the two nationalities we expected to see at the front of the grid. Yes, the Euros are going on at the moment. And yes, this could be a game that you could potentially see in the knockout stage. But who cares?
It was only a matter of time before somebody mentioned the Euro competition. And here we are. By the way, the 231 of Killian Ryan-Minen has served their drive-through penalty. I was curious if they'd be angry about that and not do that and disqualify themselves. They have chose to not do that. They have come into pit lane. So your running order as they are: Jarkko Torvinen, Baranek, Parker, Lima, Schaefer, the top 5. Absolutely insane here.
Well, as the racers, the pack, should we say, has started to fizzle out a bit as James Parker has effectively released a couple of drivers at this point in time. It is worth noting that now that James Parker is not defending for his life, he has actually managed to put a 129 on the board. So, silver linings for James Parker losing the lead of the race. And like you said, Jesse, I do think he is definitely running a full tank of fuel on that car and going to see if he can run it to the end of the race. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think there are some drivers out here today that have gone for the very aggressive plan. They're just going to go for as much speed as they can. And then there's James Parker, who's just going to play, you know, the fuel-saving game, the consistency game. And I don't know which one is the right answer at this point in time.
So, now that you've mentioned that, Mr. Gill, I've been doing some maths.
We always love to hear that.
I've determined it is possible for Parker to make it to the end, though he is going to have to manage his fuel and his lap times very closely indeed. It could go very wrong for him if he plays this game all day and still can't quite make it to the end. But effectively, he's going to have to make about 5 to 8 laps of fuel, depending. Again, it's all very rough. He's going to have to make that up, and the only way to make that up is to go very slowly or be very economical on your fuel, as Garrett is here.
Romano Berenic's made a mistake. Romano Berenic's made a mistake. He's ended up back behind James Parker.
Oh, he has done. And just as pretty as you please, Gerarda stays in front of Bonnie in the 85 Ferrari, as they may have made contact there a little bit. But here is Romano Berenic now, who has now allowed James Parker to go back through.
And this is good for Jarkko Torvinen, because this means he has an almost 3-second lead at this point in time on James Parker. And obviously now his closest contender, who was challenging him, is now back behind the BMW. But this might work out against James Parker now, though, because Romano Berenic was one of the drivers who was very, very keen to get past James Parker earlier on in the race. He's going to be keen to get back past him again. James Parker doesn't want to move out of the way for anyone at this point in time. He's racing his own race, and that could cause him to start defending again and losing more lap time. So we'll have to see how all of this plays out. But plenty still to tell so far in this race, and Bart Match is just getting even quicker, Jesse. Low 29s for the 404 at this point in time. He's just running his own race, very, very comfortable at this point in time, and he must be convinced he's on the right strategy. And it's going to be interesting to find out if he is on the right strategy, because if everyone has to pit, and I do mean everyone, if that includes James Parker as well, if everyone has to pit, he's made the big brain strategy of pitting early, getting into clear air, and having consistent low 29s for the majority of the race.
Yeah, Bart Macha, no stranger to strategy calls over at Connection Lost Racing, and they will have.
Strategist.
I was going to say, yeah, they will have known something that perhaps some of the other teams didn't. A good 80-minute race, folks, is such a weird length of time. You usually race an hour, 45 minutes, 90 minutes, 2 hours. You get the point. You don't really race 80, so that's definitely something Bart Macha, as a lead strategist, will have been on this track. They would have been mapping fuel numbers. They would have been mapping how far you can go on different fuel maps. They will have known all of that. And if there's anybody in this field that I would have trusted to get it right, it would be Bart Macha. So he might be in the, what'd you call it, the big brain seat for the day. And I don't think you're wrong there. That could very well and truly pay dividends at the end. There's so many different strategies. It is a weird race. You'll have to admit, folks at home, 80 minutes, not a mandatory stop, so you're allowed to make up your own strategy. And right off the bat, we have 3 completely different strategies, and any one of them could pay off. As my head strategist always says, well, the strategy you start the race with, nobody's wrong yet until that checkered flag comes out.
Yeah, hindsight is 2020, and you'll only know what the correct strategy for the race was until you know who the race winner is, because effectively they've done the best strategy so far, and it's Jarkko Torvinen who is leading this race at this point in time. He's looking like the winner at this point, 3.4 seconds up the road from this man, the championship leader, who has very much had the most interesting race so far. Started 5th on the grid, led after the first couple of corners because of a contact between the 2 front runners on the front row of the grid, and has then essentially been a cork in the bottle for the last 25 minutes before all chaos broke loose. And he is now effectively running in 2nd place, and Paulo Lima up into 3rd. Romano Berenic having to drop back from him. And Paulo Lima, he struggled in the first couple of races out at Imola in the Mercedes, didn't really have a great couple of races, but running in the top 3 here, up towards the front of the grid for the Portuguese driver. And I know we do have quite a few Portuguese fans around here in RCI. I think one of your good friends, Ricardo Claro, is a very big Portugal fan, isn't he?
Yeah, he sure is. And of course, you cannot forget Tortellini, otherwise known as Malinowski, also just an absolutely ridiculously fast Portuguese driver as well. And Martin Schumacher here might be losing position to Gerardus here, or maybe not. The BMW showing some grunt and just keeping in front, but a little bit of a mistake into the chicane does not cost Martin Schumacher, as Manos Gerardus does not have any way around that big BMW, at least for right now. Well, we have had some more stewards' decisions coming out. You may have noticed there's no additional penalties being assigned. Well, that's because they are not penalties. Racing incident deemed between the 696 and the 111 on lap 5, and no further action for contact between the 939 and the 1111, deemed inconsequential contact, and a warning for the 231 for what they refer to as a optimistic overtake and minor contact with the 24. Mike Noble, a little bit frustrated coming through the field, perhaps.
Yeah, and I think that's understandable. I mean, whenever you get turned around on the first lap, second corner, you are going to be quite frustrated, but Mike Noble has to put that behind him, and he has to just drive his own race at this point in time. The good thing is for Mike Noble, I don't think there's too much damage on that car, and I honestly don't think his strategy will have changed that much either. He's just got to make his way through the field a bit more now, and well, Mike Noble doesn't have any problem doing that on a regular basis, no matter what track we're at, so I think he'll just be fine. And you know, just a bit more work to do than usual for Mike Noble, and I'm sure he'll enjoy the race afterwards as well.
Well, I tell you what, though, for Noble, he had a lot of practice in race 1 and 2, coming back through the field to salvage a position. He's almost back inside the top 10 right now. Here is Mike Noble. Some of you in chat pointed out that the pink BMW is on the march, while the FFS Racing team is very much on the march. That's Mr. Jones. No, that is not Mike Jones, and no, Mr. Jones doesn't slap, but that is the next driver that they will have to pass. As somebody ducks off
coming eventually
into the pit. We talked about the Euro Cup. I talked about Mike Jones slapping.
Whoever's keeping a bingo card at home, tick them off one by one. Well, Jesse Lee's done his maths already.
Yeah. We've talked about the Euro Cup. We've talked about Mike Jones slapping.
We had a Mike Noble on pole.
There it is. Yep.
James Parker has led a race at some point.
Eventually, you know, one of the free space in the middle of the card is queuing up a replay that doesn't work.
We're not very good at these bingo cards, are we?
Well, we're too predictable, I think, is how it is. Paulo Lima up into the second place position, getting by James Parker here. I didn't suspect Paulo Lima would stay behind James Parker for very long, and, well, he sure didn't in the Lima Racing AMG. So it's going to be interesting to see if Lima can track down Torvinen. It's over 5 seconds now. Oh, my goodness, and it's absolutely come down. It was over 5, and now it's 4.1. That wasn't a timing and scoring glitch. Paulo Lima is absolutely flying.
I haven't seen a mistake from Jarkko Torvinen on the previous lap, but he is down on his delta for this lap by almost 9/10 of a second, so it could be a mistake on this current lap that he's doing right now. We'll see when he crosses the timing line, a 1:30.2 for Jarkko Torvinen, so out of the 29, so it's definitely made a mistake on his own out there at some point. It's cost him a second per lap, but I'm sure that Jarkko Torvinen won't be too bothered about that. Maybe a slight lapse in concentration and he'll get back to it. And meanwhile, James Parker will get back to defending from Romano Berenic. And Romano Berenic is probably thinking, what do I have to do to get back past this BMW? And this is almost a situation we saw in the World Tour race with Cody Pride and Martin Schumacher, where we have a Porsche behind a BMW. You need the straight line speed, you need the power to get past, and what does the Porsche not have over the BMW?
I was just going to say, Romano Berenic in the Pirate Racing Porsche is being punished for driving the Stuttgart mark today. I think it's what's happening at the end of every straightaway, or down every straightaway into every corner. and that's sort of their plight today. I can tell you there was a 15-second penalty assigned to the 909 that has since shuttered the garage, the only retirement so far for their part in contact between several cars, spinning the 100. The 123 of Mike Noble was involved, but of course that car has since retired in a racing incident between the 308 and another car for inconsequential contact as Romano Berenick continues to try and work over James Parker. How many times are we going to have to say that? Remember earlier, Ryan, we talked about the only thing James Parker didn't want to see in the rearview mirror was killing Ryan Meenan. I think the same thing with Jarkko Torvinen. I think the last thing he wants to see is Paulo Lima, but I think now Torvinen has, whatever happened to him a lap or so ago, he's been able to correct that. The gap has gone out by about half a second.
Yeah, well, now it's Paulo Lima's turn to have a poor lap. He just put in a 1:30.0, whereas Jarkko Torvinen back into the low 29s. So, yeah, it does explain the issue. So Paulo Lima's now had a slight mistake, and that's kind of stabilized the gap, 4.4 seconds at this point in time. But I think my timing and scoring has gone a bit out of control at the moment, Jesse. Because Paulo Lima's apparently up by half a second on this lap, and if that's the case, he's about to set a 1:28. However, there is a driver that has set a 1:28 so far this race, and that's Nico Kumpu down in 16th place. So
is that true?
That is true. He has set a 1:28 so far in this race. So I'm inclined to believe that my timing and scoring is not lying to me, and as Paulo Lima comes up towards the timing line, I'm about to find out, as he is 0.4 of a second up on his lap time, will cross the line, and it is going to be a 1:28.9. The timing screen has not lied to us, and Paulo Lima, I think, has just put in the best lap of the race so far.
Well, the timing and scoring working. By the way, I just remembered something else we can add to the bingo card. Technical difficulties when we technically went row-body there earlier in the broadcast. Again, we do apologize for that. We've obviously been able to...
Technical difficulties is usually the timing board, but not on this occasion, it would seem. Everything's out the window this race.
You mentioned the timing board. It reminded me, oh yeah, technical difficulties. But we have fun here. Allie Wood in chat says, if you had to choose between marriage and racing, would you choose cars or bikes? The answer to that is yes. I'm actually quite fond of both of those.
The answer is always Lamborghini.
I'm going to disagree with you on that one, Ryan. I'm a Ferrari person, as you well know.
Well, speaking of Ferraris, there are a couple in the pit lane right now. Andy Boardman's coming to the pit lane.
Oh, baby!
Gerard!
Oh my goodness! Gerardus just says, what chicane?
Talk about eating the curbs. My word. I mean, I know the Bentley is quite, good at eating the curbs, but impressive from the Audi and from the Greek driver as well. As here comes Romano Berenick. Is this the opportunity? Nope. The power of the BMW on the straights is going to shut that down immediately. And he will go again. Is he going to have a look on the inside? James Parker is going to force him close to the wall. Is he going to force the issue? Nope. Going to think better of it and come back out. But Robin Schaefer and Andy Boardman have both been in the pit lane, by the way. And so has the other Audi on the grid, the number 100. As Jesse makes oohing and ahhing noises, all the sights and scenes.
If it's disturbing you at home, I do very much apologize. This is a very spicy race, and it's making me make squeaking noises, and I do apologize for that. Again, Berenick is being punished for driving a Porsche here today, but that is not deterring the 66 at all, is it?
I think the noises you're making is the noises every person makes internally whenever watching racing that is as close as this. It's just that you have the ability to, should we say, output those noises on a regular basis.
Tom Bryant at home says all they need to get bingo is for someone to have a drive-through for track limits. It's Zolder, mate. Ask who you shall see. That will happen.
That will happen. Killian Ryan Meenan in the pit lane, by the way. He's come in to do a pit stop. I assume that is for fuel as well. So he's come in. All of the Ferraris, I believe, have done a pit stop at this point in the race, and that kind of sits in line with my theory that the Ferraris can't do the full 80 minutes, and Romano Berenic's coming in as well. He's had enough of following James Parker around. I think he's going to come in, grab some fuel, go back out, and hopefully find himself in some clean air, just like this man is in some clean air at this point in time, and he's coming up to someone at the back of the grid here, and I believe that's Robin Schaefer that he's coming up towards the back of, but Paulo Lima started to close that gap. It's only 2.9 seconds now between the front two.
Well, this is what Paulo Lima needs for his championship hopes. It's not too early or too late in the season to get the points that you need, make up that gap, and get back into the conversation. I talked about how I thought the championship was going to be between Noble and Parker, and I wondered when we were on that pace lap who could play spoiler. Paulo Lima is the answer to that right now. And meanwhile, Jarkko Torvinen leading this race going, what do you mean? Talk about me. I'm leading the race. I'm the one winning. I did the passing. Yes, Torvinen, I understand that. But that all being said, being run down at this time, very close racing.
Jesse, I don't mean to interject here, but I think Bart Matcher is going to win this race tonight. Romano Berenic has gone into the pit lane. Bart Matcher has come out almost a whole sector in front of Romano Berenic. Berenic was running up towards the top 3, by the way.
Well, you did say Bart Matcher was the fastest car on the track consistently. So
I think if every driver pits right now, Bart Matcher leads the race.
I'm doing rough head math here, but I think you're right. I think if everybody else pitted, Bart Matcher would be in the lead of the race. They were just so held up. Keep in mind, folks, the 404 pitted early, and that was when James Parker was still leading, and they were being held up. They were losing a second plus every lap, and Bart Matcher was the quickest car on the track anyway. So conservatively, they were losing at least a second. They were likely losing more than that. Oh my goodness,
Bart Matcher is about 16 seconds up the road from Romano Berenic. I can promise you that the gap between Jarkko Torvinen and Romano Berenic was less than 16 seconds.
Indeed. Absolutely so. Well, this now becomes a game of, is Torvinen going to make it to the end without pitting? And what of James Parker's strategy for the 888? Are they going to be able to make it in the BMW? You talked about it at the top of the show. Not the most fuel-efficient car, but whatever is keeping James Parker's pace up, or down rather in this case, might be because he is trying to not have to stop. Will that work? Well, we don't really know. Like I said, he needs to save many, many laps over the course of an 80-minute race, which is doable, mind you, but it isn't easy.
And interesting about Bart Matcher as well, I'm looking at the pit stop times here. Obviously, he pitted on lap 7, which is very, very early compared to everyone else. But looking at his pit stop time as well, Bart Matcher took 54 seconds from pit in to pit out. And looking at all the other Ferrari drivers and how they've done their pit stops as well, he has the quickest pit stop of any of the Ferrari drivers. That tells me that he was heavier on fuel at the start, and he's just taken a little splash and dash so he can remain stationary for as few seconds as possible in the pit lane. And that is ideally what you want to do. You want to be as stationary, for as few seconds as possible. And I think Bart Matcher has done that very well. Of course, he has to make sure he does have enough fuel to get to the end of the race, or he'll have to pit again. But I'm pretty confident that Bart Matcher knows his fuel strategy in the Ferrari. He drives the car enough, and he's sitting 10th at the moment. And my word, this has blown the door right open strategy-wise. We've got a driver on a strategy who, if everyone else has to pit, he's definitely made the right call. We've got another driver up towards the front of the grid who is on a completely different strategy, and that could win them the race. We don't know what the right strategy is at this point in time, and that's what makes this so exciting. Romano Berenic, 18 seconds off the back of Bart Matcher, and he's got company with Nico Kumpu now.
He sure does. What we're trying to say, folks at home, is all the shouting about people taking the lead earlier might be completely irrelevant here in about 30 minutes
Paolo
time,
Lima's in the pit
whenever
lane
this
as
all
well.
sorts out. Paulo Lima in the pit lane has given up their pursuit of Torvinen in front, but of course had more than cut that gap in half as we stick with Nico Kumpu in 12th place, currently trying to fight Baranek for the 11th place spot. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I'm just trying to get my head around the strategy. And well, folks, simply enough, we just are going to have to wait and find out
And
who
Bart
is
Matcher,
right.
he's ahead of Paulo Lima as well, and significantly, Paulo Lima going through turn 2, Bart Matcher going through turn 4. So at this point, in this point of the race, the assessment was right. If everyone else pits, Bart Matcher leads the race.
Well, there you have it. Just going to catch up on some more stewarding decisions. Get your NFA cards out. NFA between the no further action between the 115 and the 231. No further action between the 231 and the 24. No further action between the 115 and the 24. No further action between the 888 and the 256. No further action between the 1111 and the 939. No further action between the 1111 and the 696. Racing incident between the 1111 and the 696. Racing incident between the 1111 and the 85. No further action between the 888 and the 115. What on earth has the 1111 been into?
I don't know, but Manos Gerardis has definitely been tallying up some racing incidents and no further actions on the stewarding sheet tonight. And, well, speaking of Manos Gerardis, here he is on the back of James Parker now. James Parker's got another car and another different driver here tonight that's come up to the back of his BMW and said, I would like to be past you. And James Parker, as he has done to almost everyone here tonight, has to say, unfortunately, that's not in my plans tonight.
Well, if you are Manos Gerardis, I don't know if they will have known, probably not, that there's no further action for all of their sort of minor contacts and maneuvers that have went on, but certainly getting the benefit of the doubt on all of those incidents, folks. That's about 10 so far with the 1111, and every single one of them was found that nothing, nobody was really at fault, minor contact in half of them, and inconsequential at that. So whatever he's doing, he's definitely racing hard, but he's doing it within the rules. So good on him as he is continuing to threaten for second place here and try and take that position away from James Parker.
And guess who else is starting to slowly creep on in on James Parker? Martin Schumacher in the BMW qualified down in 12th place. He's starting to close in as well. He's just about 3 seconds behind James Parker. So one of his rivals from Imola in the BMW will be closing in, and you can see in the background as well, is that Mike Noble that I can see? It definitely is, just behind Olaf Leffer, so he's starting to close back in, and this is where you start to see how much time James Parker is losing by going for this fuel-saving strategy. Mike Noble was at the back of the grid. He was well over 25 seconds behind James Parker after the first lap. Now, he's only about 4 seconds away.
Yeah, that's something, isn't it? Noble, of course, I was just thinking about something just a moment ago. Is Mike Noble going to have words with Killian Ryan-Meenan after this race? I don't know. It's certainly not going to be looked upon favorably in the garages.
Well, usually they're in a box together, and oh, there you go, Tom. There's your bingo card. 224 drive-through for track limits. IPEC has ticked off the last one on Tom Bryant's bingo card, and that's a shame to see, but it is Zolder, and we're not too surprised, are we?
I don't know what happens when he wins bingo. Does he have to drink or something? I'm unsure. But Tom, there you go. Hope you feel better this week. And, of course, a big thank you for getting vaccinated, doing your part to help stop the spread and all that as well. So hopefully you'll be back to 100% soon. And bingo has been awarded for all of you that had technical difficulties. A drive-through penalty for a driver causing a collision, a drive-through for track limits, me doing maths, and right, what was the thing with Ryan Gill? Oh yeah, bringing up the Euro competition. You've won, essentially.
Not entirely sure what you've won, but you've won something, and Romano Berenic, he hasn't won anything at the moment, and Nico Kumpu will be looking to win himself a top 10 finish. Harsh, but unfortunately the truth is harsh sometimes, and as we can start to see the sun rise around the side of the circuit, getting lighter and lighter, we still have just under 28 minutes of this race to go. That was Paulo Lima that you could just see there in the number 24. 9.7 seconds behind Bart Matcher. So Jarkko Torvinen, if he's going to pit, he will come out somewhere in the middle of that. And look, we've got an almost 3-wide situation here. Kilian Ryan-Meenen recovering after his drive-through penalty, trying to find a way through. Ipek has had to serve a drive-through as well in this race. And I think, unfortunately, the number 85 of Barney there just getting demoted 2 places in the space of a straight and a couple of corners. And now Kilian Ryan-Meenen looking to make up another place on the AMG in front.
Yeah, that was about as simple as it gets for Bonnie right there, just sort of hitting the curb, going to the inside, allowing Kilian to go around the outside. That'll be a freebie for him. He'll say thank you very much and continue his fight with the AMG. An uphill road here, trying to claw back points, very precious points, even though early in the championship it all adds up in the end. You can ill afford to have a subpar finish, let alone a bad one for Kilian. But continuing on here, trying to take the 12th place position, getting really close indeed, thinking about going down to the inside of turn 1. Not quite close enough, has to bail out of that move.
Kilian Ryan-Meenen continues his pursuit to try and recover as many points as he can. The 224 goes wide, very, very wide, and Kilian says thank you very much. Didn't have to work too hard for that one. And the 231
that almost looked like it was on purpose.
Ooh, that Mercedes of Ipek
definitely
struggling a bit, Lamb. And now here comes the number 85. This is Barney, and he's going to take that place back as well.
Wow, way late on the brakes is Bonnie there, but getting it done into the first chicane. I didn't think that Ferrari was going to stop, but it did. And what manner of things has happened here? Was that contact between the 66?
Well, Berenic has got past Kumpu at some point, and then Kumpu's just made a mistake.
I was wondering if that was contact into the chicane that caused that. Was not at all. Just overrunning the corner was Kumpu and the 256 Ferrari. So position finally gained for Berenic. It's been, well, 3/4 of the race.
Well, Romano Berenic manages to get past Nico Kumpu, and he did manage to get past Kumpu initially. We didn't see the initial overtake, but we definitely saw the mistake. Here is Olaf Leffer, by the way, the Frenchman, who had a very, very good Porsche Masters Cup season and managed to gain himself an automatic qualifying spot for the Pro Split for the European Masters, and he's decided to keep with the Porsche for this championship and not doing bad here at the moment, sitting in 5th place. And the car looks a bit banged up, doesn't it, Jesse? On the side panels, on both sides actually of that car, and well, he's got the Barney-coloured BMW behind him at this point in time. I mean, look, if it had green where there was brown, it would probably be a bit more accurate, but I think you could probably get away with it because of the rims.
Well, the thing about Mike Noble in his cars is you try to tell him they're hideous, and he goes, what are you talking about? It's beautiful. So I'm starting to think, from a medical standpoint, the cones that receive light and decipher what color it is.
I was about to say, does Mike Noble have a potential visual impairment? Are you suggesting?
Yeah, he's some sort of colorblind, but it's not on the spectrum that we currently have. So science is still trying to define Mike Noble, and he is still trying to get back inside the top 5. Of course, Mike Noble qualified on pole, tangled with Kilian Ryan-Meenen off the start into turn 2, and by the way, you're wondering where the damage on the 308 of Leffa came from. Well, that came from the incident that sent the 909 off, by the way, on the initial start. And that's where that damage was. There was a 4-car incident with that one, and Leffa was part of that, but it hasn't hurt them too badly as they are way up the field in 5th right now. Meanwhile, James Parker still battling with Gerardus here. The 888 and the 111. Every time that Audi looks to the inside of one, I think Gerardus is going for it, but they're just a little bit too far back to make that move. Well, that's the fight for 2nd. This is the fight for 4th. Or excuse me, 5th, I should say. Leffa and Mike Noble. And Mike Noble's caught him, but catching somebody's one thing, passing is quite another. We talk a lot about the Porsche of Berenick, the 66, about how difficult it is for him to pass. That doesn't mean that it's easy to be passed in a Porsche. It just means that it's difficult because of the straight line speed. Well, going around the outside, thinking about it's Mike Noble, but can't quite get there. Case in point, just because it's hard for you to pass doesn't mean it's easy for you to be passed. Right there, Mike Noble had everything going his way, but just ran out of time and room to get that pass done.
Yeah, Mike Noble, though, he will bide his time. He will make sure that the right chance comes his way. And looking up towards the front of the grid, I was just monitoring Jarkko Torvinen's gap as you see Ipek here and Jones going side by side. The number 100 trying to take 14th place off of the Mercedes and not able to do so. And I was watching the gap between Jarkko Torvinen and James Parker. 13 seconds now it is between those two. So that's the amount of time that James Parker has lost since Jarkko Torvinen got past them. And of course that's mostly down to the fuel saving that James Parker is having to do right now. Under 21 minutes of this race remaining. And essentially, the only drivers that have not pitted are the drivers in front of Mark Matcher. So that is your top 7. Torvinen, Parker, Gerardus, Schumacher, Leffa, Noble, and Jenkins. Everyone else has pitted for fuel. So it's going to be interesting to see which drivers can make it to the end of this race. Like you said, Jesse, 80 minutes is a very odd length. And if you think about endurance stint limits, they usually set around 65 to 70 minutes because not that many cars can go over 75 minutes. One of the cars that we do know can go over 75 minutes comfortably at a lot of circuits is the Bentley. But the Bentley's not in this championship.
Yes, of course, the Euro Masters Championship, only continental Europe circuits and continental European cars, so the Bentley is not in there. One could make an argument, oh, well, isn't it technically owned by a German manufacturer? Yes, but it's assembled in the UK and it has a British badge on it. It's sold as a British car, so it is ineligible for this championship. And I love things like this because it forces teams to think outside the box, so to speak. You know, you're going to European tracks only, but you also may not have your favorite car in the race. And it is interesting to see the different dynamic. We were worried last week, Ryan, that this championship would be dominated by one particular manufacturer, and it hasn't happened. Look at our top 3 right now: Porsche, BMW, Audi. That's all we could ever ask for. Is it's very, very parried.
You should have heard the conversations I was having with a significant portion of the drivers here, saying, "Isn't this just going to be a Ferrari Cup?" And I said, "Well, not necessarily." And a lot of the drivers just weren't too sure about it, and a lot of them said, "Well, you know, I'm going to pick the Ferrari." And it's like, okay, well, you know, there's a lot of BMWs on the field. There's quite a few Porsches. And, you know, there's no Lamborghinis in the top split, but there are quite a few spread out amongst the silver, AM, and rookie splits that we have here this evening as well. They're all racing at the same time in their own splits. But, you know, we came to round 1. The BMW won in the first race, and an Audi won in the second race. And an Audi won in the pouring rain at Imola, by the way. So,
I wouldn't have called that.
No, if there were any conditions where the Audi would not excel in, it would be in the rain. and Cody Pride drove the wheels off that car. And it's entirely possible that a Ferrari could win tonight. We've already talked about that with Bart Matcher's strategy, but the drivers leading at the race at the moment, it's a Porsche, then it's a BMW, then it's an Audi. There isn't a Ferrari at the front right now. Strategy still has to play out. But if Bart Match is going to win tonight, it's not going to be on pure aggressive pace. It's going to be intelligent strategy. And that's not really something the Ferrari is very well known for.
Yeah, it is insane how this is all sort of shaped out. I was definitely worried that this championship would be dominated by two manufacturers. It didn't happen in round one in either race, and here we are a week later in a longer race, and it still hasn't happened. Ryan Gill, I'm about to go on a ramble. If something happens in the race, please do interrupt me. Trap Speed Simulator in chat says, I'd like to join an event soon. Just joined Discord. Well, don't I have some news for you? If you are enjoying today's broadcast, why not like, subscribe, hit the bell, don't miss a single race. We'll be back with you on Thursday for the GT4 Championship, and of course you can find us there. That series anchored by Ryan Mawson. And why you were talking about Discord, why not join our Discord? Link in the description. You can not only find a schedule for all of the upcoming races, you can join the races yourselves. We have splits from anything from esports aliens right down to people just starting sim racing. So whatever your skill level, we have a split for you. And of course, a very big thank you to all of our partners that help bring this race and every race to you. Race Department, aka Informatica, Raceface, Speed Lab, Sim Racing GP, and of course Driver 61. And of course, we've been teasing it for some time now, but we have some new partners coming in, and very exciting indeed to see some of the stuff that's coming up for RCI in the future. But just a big thank you for everybody who turns up and watches the races. We hope that you're enjoying it as much as we are, and of course we absolutely love having you with us. Of course, I'm Jesse Lee here with Ryan Gill and Jake the Bosmeister Boswell in the broadcast booth with you tonight. And a big round of applause to Jake, by the way, for keeping up with everything. It's been a bit of a chaotic race.
It has been a bit of a chaotic race, and just as we continue to get into the latter stages of this race, Killian Ryan Meenan closing down on Niku Kumpu, and going to go through here. Very nicely done. We've seen Killian do that move quite a few times throughout this race, and unfortunately not ending up towards the front end of the grid because of that drive-through penalty he collected earlier on. But still some very, very nice moves, and he's just trying to do the best job he can to collect as many points as possible here tonight to keep himself in the title fight.
Killian's hoping somebody runs out of fuel or has to pit again, or they got it wrong, because he might finish inside the top 10, but again, each position is several points. It's not 1 point per position, so they'll be hoping that some people have some dramas up front. Dirk Torvinen still leads the race in the 115 Porsche over James Parker, who has held Gerardus off for, I've been counting, the past 22 minutes.
Well, Gerardus, I imagine, getting quite frustrated, but James Parker is just driving his own race at this point in time, and he's not too bothered about what Gerardus thinks. And in fact, James Parker's lap time's starting to come down a bit now into the mid-29s, and obviously his fuel tank getting a bit lighter, but still having to fuel save. Gerardus is off and into the pit lane, so the Audi coming in for its scheduled fuel pit stop, and Killian Ryan thinking for a similar move as he pulled off on Kumpu for Romano Berenic, but just not able to do it this time around. But he'll have a go again on the next lap, I am sure.
Well, that's how that was early in the race. I think lap 3 through 7 or 8. That's how it was. It was Killian Ryan Meenan trying to get around Berenic, and eventually did. Obviously took the lead of the race, did Killian, before the drive-through for the contact early came through. Mike Noble, of course, is going to benefit up inside the top 5 as Gerardus pits. but still behind Leffa in the 3:08. As nothing is, it's so hard, folks. I know I've said it a million times. It sounds like a broken record for the record. I am a broken record, but the point is, it is so difficult to pull off a pass here without getting a bit aggressive or putting yourself into trouble. Nobody wants to do that, especially at this late stage of the race. Certainly saw our fair share of wild driving to start with, but Mike Noble driving to a number here. And we saw Gerardus come into the pit lane. That's effectively tapping out, saying that I can't make it. James Parker, who hasn't pitted, still out there. Again, like you said, a lot now of the top 5 have not pitted. And it's basically a race against time. 12 minutes to go. Let's set the stage for you. 12 minutes to go. The top 5 haven't pitted. They will be certainly trying to not have to come to pit lane. Everybody behind them, led by Bart Boccia in the Connection Lost Ferrari, have pitted and should be good to go. It is, of those 5 out front right now, who will be able to make it and who won't.
Interesting that none of the remaining BMW drivers have pitted yet. We have seen Romano Berenic in the Porsche pit. We have not seen the rest of the Porsches pit so far. Jenkins is the only driver behind Bartmacher that has not come into the pit lane. And I know that the Porsche is particularly troublesome on its fuel. It would be one of the more difficult cars to get to the end on a full tank over 80 minutes, but maybe some of these drivers think they can do it. Jarkko Torvinen leading out in front by 14 seconds. He's not slowing down at all, but clearly he thinks he can get to the end, I guess? Maybe? I mean, surely if he was going to splash and dash, he would have done so by now.
How kind is that Porsche on fuel? I know it's not a big screaming
Not
V8.
very kind at all.
So it's, the conventional wisdom would tell you that, well, it's a 6, so it's going to be better on fuel economy. But that's not how it works in GT3 racing. Smaller displacement does not necessarily mean better fuel economy. And that's what I thought I had been told by our other broadcaster, Stewie, who is a lifetime Porsche fan, you may have heard. And he reckons that it drinks about as much as any other car. So that's interesting.
Leffer is in. So there goes one of the Porsches, has blinked. The 308 can't make it to the end on one tank and is going to have to refuel. So that's Olaf Leffer into the pit lane, and they're rolling again now. I do remember in the Porsche Masters Cup, it was Jordan Verschalks managed to eke out 75 minutes at Donington Park on a one tank with the Porsche. However, he did admit he'd been in the fuel-saving map for the entire race, and he couldn't have done an extra lap. He couldn't actually finish the parade lap at the end of the race. So that was very, very tight, and that was at Donington Park. Now, obviously, the fuel usage between Donington Park and Zolder is not going to be the same, but I would be very surprised if these Porsches can do 80 minutes around here. And of course, we'll have to find out, won't we, Jesse? We're learning with the viewers here tonight. Can a Porsche do 80 minutes at Zolder? That's what the experiment is tonight.
Here's the thing. We often tell you this, but we tell you this in this particular time. Oh, no. Well, I had it confirmed by Tom Bryant that the 12 of Jenkins, the Porsche, was trying to make it to the end without stopping on fuel, but they are going to have to come to pit lane anyway. Jenkins drive-through penalty for too many track limit violations. Remember, you get 3 of those before you get a penalty. The 4th one cost you a trip down pit lane, and that's exactly what's happened. It's contact here between Killian Ryan Meenan and Leffa, trying to race for what is effectively going to be the 8th place position after Jenkins pits. We haven't talked about Jenkins at all today, as more contact there, I believe. We haven't talked about Jenkins today at all, but what a day that they were having, coming from near the back of the field, racing inside the top 10, minding their own business. But unfortunately, Jenkins into the pit lane will not get a good result here today. question from the chat at Redford asking, will Torvinen be able to splash and dash and come out in front of Bart Macha? Well, I have done the math, and no, he will not. The pit delta is 40-some seconds, and it's not likely. I think Bart Macha has done enough. I think it's only about 44 seconds, I think, is the gap right about now.
They're doing identical lap times. So Bart Matcher is going quick enough to maintain whatever gap he has to Jarkko Torvinen.
Look at this curve move. Oh, baby!
Oh, Nico Kumbu.
Was that a bail? I think that might have been a bail. It looked like a brake locked, but that's not how brakes are not going to independently lock on a GT car like that. So I assume he ditched it on purpose there to not cause a contact with the 308. But otherwise, Leffel will appreciate that, but Kumpu will be muttering to himself. But the short answer is no. I don't think Torvinen has the gap to come out in front of Bart Macha in the 404 Ferrari. I think he is just shy of that based on how pit out is here. It bends you way further around the track, and even if he did have the delta, that bend might be the difference maker. It's several seconds long.
Paulo Lima was 2.9 seconds behind Torvinen when he came into the pit lane. Now, Paulo Lima has not gained any time on Bart Matcher since he's come out of the pit lane. It's stabilized around 9 seconds. So, taking that into account, Bart Matcher should, in theory, come out around 6 seconds ahead of Jarkko Torvinen. Now, of course, the gaps may have changed since Paulo Lima came into the pit lane and all sorts. So it could be that there has been a change in those gaps, but I think it's comfortable to say that Bart Matcher, if everyone else has to pit, he's going to be in the top 2, most likely in the lead.
Yeah, Bongo in chat confirming that Jarkko Torvinen is on map 4 of 8. That is the middle map. It's not full save, but of course it is the middle map. It is the lesser of the two evils, and trying to make lap time and also save fuel. So Torvinen in the 115 is not looking to come back down pit lane in this race. Now, 5 minutes to go. We'll have to see how well that all comes out, as Mike Noble trying this on Schumacher. It is a BMW 234 at the moment, but Noble would very much like to get back on the podium. What a recovery drive it would be for Mike Noble to be spun in turn 2 and come all the way back to a podium, but Martin Schumacher doesn't really care about that as much as Mike Noble does.
No, he does not, and interesting to see these 3 BMWs at the top. Jarkko Torvinen's in the pit lane. So Jarkko Torvinen can't go to the end.
He must have been trying.
The theory is right, 75 minutes.
Yeah. Torvinen must have been trying to save that entire time, but realizing that he's going to run out of fuel here and not be able. Now, who's going to be next? Folks, the top 4 now, excluding Torvinen, who is in the pit lane. Parker, Schumacher, and Noble have not pitted for fuel. James Parker is going to be back on the point of this race for the first time in just about 1 hour's time. Parker, who we assumed was fuel saving the entire time, and matter of fact, that quick stop for Torvinen is going to get him out in front of Bart Macha here. That must have been a really quick stop for the 115.
It was quicker than Bart Matcher's pit stop, it definitely was, and that gap has definitely changed since Paulo Lima came into the pit lane. So Bart Matcher hasn't come out ahead of Jarkko Torvinen. Torvinen has maintained his position over Bart Matcher, so Bart Matcher remains in 5th place. But the big question is now, what happens with the BMWs?
I don't know, but they have to race each other here, and who knows what fuel map they're on. And going back to the 115 of Torvinen, what that tells me, the fact that he was able to get out in front of Macha, is that Torvinen only needed a couple of liters to get to the end. And whereas Bart Macha, when he pitted, he must have needed significantly more fuel, and he just wasn't able to make up all of that time. So Torvinen does get out in front, and of course, with our comparison, I was comparing apples to apples, but I would not have believed that if Torvinen came in, he only needed that little bit there. As going through the chicane and an accident there. Was that Kumpu? It was. Kumpu completely misses the second chicane here and goes off into the dirt. Now, they did this earlier to avoid an incident, but I think the hop and the transition from the dirt to the asphalt caused a complication, and the 256 has been hard into the wall. And again, just attempting to make a pass and realizing that it's not going to come off and not wanting to impact anybody else's race. That's commendable, though it may be. It's going to be a frustrating end to Kumpu's challenge. James Parker for the 888 BMW cycles back up to the point right now. Martin Schumacher and Mike Noble in tow. It is a all BMW podium. 2 minutes to go. Do they have the fuel?
You would think if they're going to go this late into the race that they know that they have the fuel, but we just do not know. And I mean, will James Parker try and slow down? No, he doesn't have. It doesn't have anywhere near enough to be able to slow down and possibly make this the final lap of the race. He'd have to slow down another good 17 odd seconds, which he doesn't have in change over Schumacher and Noble. So James Parker starts the penultimate lap of the race. So there's this lap and one more to go. And they pretty much have to hope that they can make it to the end, that they have enough for 2 laps left of this race. It'll be interesting to see if the BMW can do it. It won't be the case at all of the circuits we go to this season. Remember, we have Paul Ricard on the calendar later in this season. I don't think anyone can do 80 minutes on, Paul Ricard, especially with that back straight, no matter what.
Initial straight, absolutely not. It's not happening.
So,
by the way, do you remember earlier when I said Mike Noble just wanted to get back on the podium and wanted to be third? Well, yeah, now he wants second.
He definitely does want second place, doesn't he? It's BMW 1, 2, 3. BMW will love to see it, and they won't care which order it's in, but obviously the drivers care which order it's in. And for James Parker right now...
Mike Noble really cares.
For James Parker right now, it's P1, and it's P2 for Schumacher and Noble in third. How much will that change over the course of the next lap? James Parker, he comes to start the final lap of the race, doesn't pull off towards the pit lane. That tells you that he has the fuel to make it.
Well, he thinks he has the fuel to make it.
Neither of the other two peel off into the pit lane as well. The BMW looks to be the only car that can do 80 minutes on full fuel saving. We know James Parker has been full fuel saving here today. He was the cork in the bottle for 20 minutes. He was the slowest car on the track for almost 20 minutes. And in sequence, Berenick and Barney have picked up drive-through penalties for track limits.
Might I suggest same corner at the same time, because they are nose to tail there, and I'm pretty sure...
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they would have picked that up together, following one another.
We're about to see.
Yeah, is it here in the second chicane? Yep, that's exactly what it was. They went to the inside of the curve, and that's it. Well, I was wondering, Ryan Gillett, the extra lap would hurt any of the 3 leading BMWs. It doesn't look like it's going to. The fuel strategy game looks like it's going to play out in an absolute treat. James Parker, what can you say about the man? He's already won this season. And of course, he was fuel saving immediately. He was trying to get to a number, like you said, the cork in the bottle. And it has all come to plan. He was able to hold everybody else up. He was able to make the number, and he's going to do it. He's going to come to the line and win it. James Parker, a 2-time winner.
So James Parker then becomes the first repeat winner of the championship, and Martin Schumacher and Mike Noble make it a BMW podium. Jarkko Torvinen did his best, definitely my driver of the day, I would say, in terms of excitement. And he's going to come home across in fourth, but massive shouts to Bart Matcher. He needed to pit today. He pitted early. He jumped almost the entire field of cars that pitted And that is a well-deserved 5th place that he is ecstatic with.
That was absolutely brilliant job by Bart Macha, one of the best strategists in ACC. He's going to be able to pull that off. Paulo Lima comes home in 6th place. Gerardus 7th. Killian Ryan Meenan, after all his troubles, 8th. Leffa in the 308 will be the next across the line. Benny will be next and actually will cross the line, get a 30-second penalty. I think Kumpu will then be promoted in front of him. Mr. Jones, Schaefer, Ipik, Baranek, what can you say? Baranek just fighting for a podium for half the day, and then it all went away for him in the 66. The same could be said for Jenkins, was inside the top 10, and a late drive-through penalty will see them finish 16th. We had 18 cars take the green flag. 16 made it to the finish, and I can't believe the BMWs were the ones to make it to the line. Folks, they had to save so much fuel to do that, and they absolutely did it. Crazy day at the races.
We saw it, didn't we? We saw it with James Parker, slowest car on track at one point in time. You know, he was a cork in the bottle. Everyone behind him was going quicker. But my word, he knew what he needed to do today, and he acted it out perfectly. The strategy worked. Mike Noble was really, really frustrated. He was on the front row. He was in pole position. He knew he could win this race here today. He probably had the same strategy as James Parker, but it just was not to be. And James Parker saying in the chat, map 3 and 125 litres at the start, a horrendous experience. Well, guess what, James? You're going to have to do it 2 more races this season, because we have 2 more 80-minute races with no mandatory pit stops. And, well, I don't think they're all going to get away with it at Paul Ricard.
No, I don't think you can get away with it at Paul Ricard, but what you can do is minimize your time on pit lane, and certainly some of the teams here would have figured that out. Bart Macha and I think James Parker probably have just about the best idea. And map 3 of 8 in a BMW, the entire race, not being able to do anything but defend, and defend he did, and safely at that. A big round of applause for anybody who was dedicated throughout that 80-minute race to do that. Well, it started off with fireworks and cars being spun around. It ended in fuel mileage, and what an excellent race it was. It was a race of when will they, can they? Well, the answer to that is, well, the BMWs could.
Yeah, and it's going to be a very, very interesting race in a week's time, because I did say we have Paul Ricard on the calendar, but before we head out to Le Castellet, we head out to Spain. We're going to Barcelona next week, and Barcelona is going to be a very difficult track for them to save fuel on as well. That very, very long main straight that it has. I don't think it's going to be so easy for the likes of the BMWs to save fuel there again, but we'll have to see. What can they cook up for us? What will be the correct strategy out at Barcelona? And, well, it's going to be interesting to find out. Of course, Jesse, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you in the box here tonight. You might be here for the rest of the season, I've heard, and we'll have to figure out the logistics of that. But get your tickets booked for Barcelona anyway. And,
I absolutely love it.
And we can come watch the race in the bar.
There you go. Well, the Jesse Lee takeover of RCI in full effect continuing. And, well, even if I'm not here on comms, I'm still going to be here for Barcelona. You should be too. Remember to like, subscribe, hit the bell. Don't miss a single race. We, of course, will be back with you on Thursday for the continuation of the GT4 Championship. That championship has been absolutely insane. Say hello to Ryan Mawson for me on that occasion. And, Ryan, always a pleasure. Big thanks to Jake the Bosmeister Boswell for broadcasting, and, of course, our fantastic stewards here today as well.
Yeah, and of course, we will be back in a week's time for Barcelona. Of course, we do have the GT4 Championship coming up, the finale of the Friday GT3 Championship as well. And, of course, we have the next season of the Night Owl Championship starting soon as well, and that's going to be exciting. to start all over again. The World Tour is wrapped up, but Super Silverstone is not too far away. So get yourself signed up for that when sign-ups do eventually go live. 4 classes on 1 track, and we've got plenty of splits open for everyone. But it's been a fantastic evening here with everyone. We hope you have enjoyed the show. Leave a like and subscribe. Of course, it really does help us out here at RCI. And of course, a big thank you to Race Department, AK Informatica, Raceface Speed Lab, Sim Racing GP, Drivers Legacy 1, and Fanatec as well for helping us do what we do here at RCI. And a big shout out to the stewards as well. They've had quite a bit of work to do in the early stages of the race. I'm sure it got quieter later on, but they still do a fantastic job here either way. We'll be back in a week's time for the continuation of the European Masters Championship at Barcelona. But from myself and the rest of the commentary team here, good evening and enjoy the rest of your week.